welcome to this Thursday and welcome to our Blitz session, Nature, Your Co-Teacher. I am Mellissa Wilson from Mellissa, and I am blessed to be learning with you today as we think about how can nature and especially increased access to the outdoors really benefit your students and all of those learning goals and expectations and hopes and visions that we have for our kids succeeding this year. How might nature be the secret remedy that has been so elegantly simple there the whole time? Very quickly about me, as I mentioned, I am a consultant for Mellissa, and a few of the places that you might have seen me before or could see me in the future, I work mainly with our K-5 teams and including our pre-K and early childhood teams in GSRP. So I'm blessed to work with both our pre-K and preschool learners along with our K-5. I also work closely with our coaches and our COSA initiative, and also play a big role in our summer learning. So I'm blessed to be learning with you in the remainder of our summertime as we think about how nature can really be that link to success for our students. So during our time today, our focus will really be this. Let's consider and challenge ourselves to think about how nature and indoor learning, or the outside, can be a really reliable and engaging way to explore not just the benefits academically, but also how it really is a support of the whole child. So I want to pause for a moment and give us a chance to think about these things. So think back to when you were young and think back to a memorable outdoor space from your childhood. So think about your childhood in a memorable outdoor space, a place you used to go to play. And then think about, where was that place? Was it close to home or was it far from home? So you're thinking about a memorable place, and where was that place? Was it close to the neighborhood or was it far away? Or you had to trek a little bit to get there? And what did you do there? So as we're thinking about that, I want to give us 30 seconds of this quiet nature time to think about that. And when the 30 seconds is up, or as you're thinking right now, feel free to put your ideas in the chat. So hopefully that gave you a moment just to think back to your childhood and to remember a memorable space that you had, and whether it was far from home, and what did you do there? So I'm looking at our chat and I can see that there were some folks who were blessed to have a woody area behind their house. Many had a park. Some places were up north at a campground, so probably some space you could explore. Okay. Some fishing, a neighborhood playground, a place at the end of the road. Woods, more woods, trees, rocks. So you are my people. When I was young, I too had a place. It was across the street. And when I think about right now, my daughter being able to go on her own, probably around, I don't know, age 10, maybe, across the street to what was really an old construction site that we called the Dirt Hills, and play freely, I don't know if she'd have that same permission. And so I challenge us to think about what we had the access, perhaps not all, but some had, to free play and the outdoors, and consider, is that what the majority of our children have now, who are blessed to be in those desks with us so very soon? And so when we think about the opportunity children of this generation have compared to what even our past generations had, including us, whether it was a well-groomed space or just simply some outdoor area in nature, chances are they look quite different. And the access and the opportunity the children have now compared to what we had is quite different. This is an interesting study done a few years back by an author named Tim Gill. And he was looking at studying what is the childhood distance that has changed as far as where kids were able to play. And so he specifically studied families over time. And this is one example of a family that he studied. And so he noted that the great-grandfather in 1919 was given the freedom to go about almost 6 miles away from his home. And for those of you who said you liked to fish when you were younger, it was to fish, right? That's where the access point was. So his family, around when he was 8 or so, allowed him to go on his own 6 miles away from home. The same family then, the grandfather, in 1950, he was allowed to explore about a mile away from his home, the freedom of play. The son in the current study in 2012, he was allowed to go 300 yards from his home, just to the end of his own street. And so when we think about an example like this, it may not be so different than what one might learn from our own study of our own freedom to explore within our own family. And we think about the fact that due to many variables in our current times, children aren't necessarily allowed that freedom to explore, to go to a place that we might have had in a woods or a stream or even a neighborhood down the road, a playground. They might not have that freedom, nor that access to nature. As we know, our landscapes are changing, the health of our neighborhoods are changing. And so we really think about the opportunity that schools could play in helping children to get that increased benefit of the contact with nature. So one of the things I hope you take away from this session today is more fuel for the fire as far as going back to talk to school leaders. If you are a school leader, talking to those higher school leaders to have us think about our systems and policies around access to the outdoors and time outdoors and nature within those spaces, because we can't ignore the benefits to children when they receive increased contact with nature and the outdoors. These are just the top of the iceberg points, but enhanced motivation and joy and engagement in learning. We're all seeking that. We see higher levels of physical activity and fitness. Naturally, healthier kids are going to be happier kids, more engaged kids. Increased academic performance. How many of us have goals connected to student success? And improved mental health. A huge and important focus right now as we consider the whole child. So if we handed a leader, these are the benefits of this new initiative I have. If we do this, our kids are going to be healthy, happy, and do well in school. I don't know any leader who would say, not interested. But yet, we continue to reduce the amount of time children have outdoors. We reduce the access to nature because nature walks take too long, or going out into that wooded area behind the school or down the road would take away from our time in literacy block or math block. But yet if nature can do these things, we might ask ourselves, how can we make more of it fit? We also ask ourselves, who gets the benefit and access to nature? Depending on where your school is located, in what area, district, within our county, there's a vast difference in what our playgrounds and neighborhoods look like, especially the access to nature. So don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about most likely those beautiful playgrounds you might have, or unfortunately not. We're talking about access to trees, grass, shrubbery, places where kids can actually touch and engage in real things. So although playgrounds are beautiful and certainly benefit children's activity, these studies are based on actually getting children into nature and the benefit that actual nature can bring to kids. So we have to consider some of the data that we have. When we think about access and inequities, and this is based on 2017 census data, we can see that the percent living in nature-deprived areas by income level is unfortunately disproportionate. I'll give you a moment to take a look at that. One more piece. When we think about the percent of people living in a nature-deprived area, again, by census demographic, again, disparity. And so if we pair what we've thought around with the decreased access kids get at home to exploring, going widely throughout their neighborhood and spaces, and pair it with the fact that in many cases where children might live does not even provide them that chance to be in nature, again, we lift up the importance of schools. Schools can choose the schedule. Schools can choose to increase time outdoors. Schools can choose to put the whole child at the forefront and say that includes more time in nature. So let's keep thinking about that and the benefits that it brings. If you're involved in your school improvement processes and in the whole child or social emotional, any initiative at your school, most likely these visuals are familiar to you. When we think about school improvement planning and the whole child initiative, if it doesn't include increased access to outdoors, or even a study around how much time do children get at recess, and what barriers might stop some children from going out due to perhaps behavior policies, then we can always start there. But let's start to consider what systems are in place that give all kids access to the outdoors and to play, and how might you serve in your sphere of influence to help increase that opportunity. So all throughout these slides, and I'll make sure that we have access to them as well, I've inserted different studies, whether it's a QR code here or in the speaker notes, a link to the study. But again, I want you to leave feeling prepared with not only talking points, but research and studies that support why children need nature and why schools need them to have more of it if we truly want kids to succeed and find joy in being within our classrooms. And so when we think about the opportunity to reach more children, let's consider the role that nature can play. When we think about the opportunity for academic learning and the positive outcomes that can come from us, again, this is just a few of the let's check the box things that leaders in schools look for. We can see the opportunity in academic learning, and we can see the opportunity in their social emotional learning. All of those are positive things. I'll give you a moment just to skim through them. For those of you who like to think about the theory of action or the overall vision of what this means, this might mean returning to this slide at a later time to process. I know there's a lot of text there, but in essence, it goes through the in and out of why, again, increased access to play and the outdoors will give us the output of academic success. And so when we think about these studies, this research around why it's so very good for kids, we also lean into what our science colleagues at the state level have lifted for us. And it's lifted that at a basic important level, it's an issue of equity, right? That all children in all Michigan areas do have the right to engage in science study. And so that science study must also include exposure to nature if we're really going to give kids that chance for hands-on learning. That's hands-on learning that we don't have to purchase. We just have to find that space in our schoolyards in order to bring children outdoors. If you're an early childhood educator, think about what you unfortunately know as the reduction of the classroom kitchen. In many cases, when we went to school, and even perhaps some of your children, when they went to school, there was a kitchen inside the kindergarten classroom. Hopefully, most pre-K and GSRP classrooms still do have the kitchen, but many kindergartens don't. And that's a real disservice to our kids because so much social emotional learning has come from that kitchen area, the dramatic play area. So let's challenge the system. If they're going to take the kitchen out of the kindergarten, let's take it outside. Think about the opportunity for not just your kindergarten students, but your K-3 students, especially if suddenly there was a kitchen area developing outside. Now, certainly we get creative and go to Pinterest and find all the beautiful examples of outdoor play spaces, but I can start with some simple tables that maybe you were going to take to Goodwill the other day anyway, perhaps something that you see on the side of the road. I can start with some buckets, but all we need are just some spaces for children to have some pans, some spoons, some buckets, and the permission to play. The invitation to take some mud and water and get a little messy, to pretend as if they're making mud pies, to pretend that they have the restaurant or the food truck. But let's consider some creative ways for how we might bring play and pair it with the outdoors to give our kids the development that they deserve. A few of the mentor texts that I lean into, both in the ideas I'm about to share, as well as when I do work with schools, are these three. Reading science, which helps us to think about especially our literacy initiatives in general and how we can pair both science and literacy for increased success. A Place for Wonder has beautiful applicable classroom examples of pre-K to second grade classrooms and thinking about increasing wonder within the space. And a recent one, Literacy Moves Outdoors, has some very applicable really pre-K through, I would say, sixth grade examples of how we might think about the resources, especially online, and the ideas in the book. And some of those I'll share with you now. But I do want to acknowledge these three texts and the authors as I begin to share some of the ideas that I've taken and will share with you. So one way to think about using nature as your co-teacher is to think about, first, let's start inside. As we know, as we set up our classroom spaces and places, and we think about protocols and routines, at times, starting from the inside first might be a safer place as you develop your classroom spaces and routines, especially if you're blessed to have a space where students have writing time, perhaps even some free writing time, or maybe a writing center. If you're in an early childhood classroom, think about an observation window as one option for that. Hopefully, all of our classrooms are blessed to have at least a window or two where we can set up a space for students to observe. Think about the power of writing over time. If we're observing a similar space, but watching the changes that take place. Think about all the time in early childhood classrooms and even kindergarten classrooms that perhaps are spent on the weather or the calendar when we could simply go to the window and have an authentic observation and conversation about what do we see from the outdoors? What is evidence that it might be chilly or warm? And what do we see in the changes and what's going on in our vegetation and place right outside our window? You might even consider placing strategically a window bird feeder so that students can get close view of the types of creatures that might inhabit their space out there, or maybe hang it on a post or a tree. The power of students observing real things outdoors, watching authentically our trees change and talking about why and what they notice about different trees and why some trees change quickly, some don't change at all, like conifers, and the power of natural discussion. And so one way to start thinking about increasing nature is thinking again from the inside out. Another idea to think about, along with our window watching, is including our natural writing instruction. So when we think about engaging our writers, even some of our hesitant writers, think about the authenticity of engaging kids and what they've naturally created. So starting with a sketch from our window writing, and then bringing that to a small group writing lesson where we say, I see what you've drawn, tell me more about it. And working with the students on a letter sound identification and eventually printing those words. If they're older students, having them start with what they've written and working with them on thinking about those multisyllabic words that they're trying to use to describe that illustration. But in general, we can really use window watching as a place to not only observe and learn and look and talk, but also it's a great place to see authentic application of students' knowledge of letter, sound, and its application to that orthographic mapping that we know as spelling. We also think about the power and impact of doing something so small as to giving kids a reason to engage more on the outside from their window. Many students who were in a study that was done with increasing students' access to the outdoors, including simply the increased visual of nature, reported less stress. And so isn't necessarily a bad thing when students are looking out the window. Perhaps they're not really disengaged. Perhaps it's the brain break they need to view nature to reduce the stress they might be feeling. I don't know about you, but that small tidbit made me really rethink at times when I was a classroom teacher and I saw students staring out the window and considered it as a disengagement. I definitely think differently about that now. Now we know it could be a stress relief. So as we consider to think about how we can think about increasing nature from the inside to out, we also think about the opportunities for a discovery table. And this discovery table could be of found items outside. It certainly is a way to engage parents those first few weeks of school by sending home a quick message, a note, a letter, an email saying, we are going to become curious wanderers in this classroom. I want to work with your student to develop their sense of wonder and also learn more about you, your culture, your community, and what you find special. And so in that way, we invite families to send in items of wonder that will bring about curiosity and interest to kids. These could be simple things as far as nature items found in the outdoors. They could be special items from home that families are comfortable having students hold and look and shake. But in essence, we're connecting with families to know that we value curiosity in the classroom, and we're inviting them to share something, whether it be a book, an item, or a found thing outside their home. We're asking families to participate, to send something in so that we can build on our curiosity at home. As it develops, the Wonder Table can certainly turn into that instructional tool that engages kids in an upcoming unit of study, an upcoming concept in science, or simply something in the humanities and our social studies work. But it becomes a place of wonder. And it's amazing how a few hand lenses, a few curious objects, and certainly some classroom instruction around discussion tools and wondering and questioning, what we'll see from that increased engagement and discussion from our students throughout the day. As we continue to think about how to move more outdoors, we think about pairing the outdoors with the indoors. So in this image, this comes from a classroom that I worked with. It was a first grade classroom. And we were thinking about how do we tie and make more intentional the read alouds to our science standards while still increasing students' engagement with the outdoors. And so we landed on that together, the teacher and I would do some co-planning around her read alouds. Traditionally, her read alouds were high engagement texts that she was aiming to be culturally relevant, which was a great, great place to be. But I challenged her thinking to say, how often are your read alouds focused on nonfiction, on things that are real, that students could learn about and wonder about? And as we looked through her plans, we noticed that in most cases it was narrative. And so we planned together and sought out different texts that were available that were connected to her science units of study. And one of those studies involved worms. And so we found some texts and some read alouds, some, as you see, in person, others we used online read alouds because the book wasn't available. And then we did study, we had kids wonder and draft questions, and then we brought real worms in and gave the kids the chance to use hand lenses to really learn in a very careful way, a respectful way of the creatures, more about what they had been reading about and hearing in the read alouds. So that's just one example of how when we think about what we're already doing in the classroom, in most cases, every classroom every day is engaging in an interactive read aloud. That next step would be consider how often are those read alouds informative and how might they be more connected to the outdoors and to our science standards so that we can connect that with hands-on learning, hopefully involving more time outside as well. One of the other mentor texts that I shared was Literacy Moves Outdoors. And one of the online sources that is referenced in that text is Wild Wonder Foundation. And the Wild Wonder Foundation, through what I've seen thus far in my own exploration, is a really great place for educators to go to access free lessons and ideas that are lifted in the book about especially how do we increase writing and classroom dialogue around what we might do outside in very simple protocols. So I want to share a few of those with you. One of the ideas lifted is the place to start in nature journaling. And so when we think about how to increase our access to the outdoors, while also paired with sound explicit instruction, nature journaling would be a beautiful place to start for any grade level. Considering that we would need to have time a few times throughout the week, or even blessed to have at least one day a week where we're going outdoors in a routine way to do some nature journaling around what we see, which would be our observations, what we wonder from what we see, which would be our questions, and then it reminds me of, which are the connections students would make to what they're seeing. What's great about the Wild Wonder Foundation, and I've included a snippet from their website, is that all of the protocols that they lift and how to get started with getting kids more outdoors and using nature journaling as a vehicle come with very descriptive lesson plans. And so that's one thing I really liked about the Wild Wonder Foundation, that they gave the idea, but also gave the how-to along with projected time, ways to think, and also follow-up ideas. So if you're thinking about how do we get more of the inside out, nature journaling would be a beautiful place to start. And certainly we know as we're thinking about constructing those opportunities, we're thinking about what writing instruction lessons would I provide prior to that, including modeling of my own writing? How might I then also include student artifacts as we come back in to lift their voices and to share their ideas? And then how could I use what the students are writing in perhaps small group time when I'm looking at how are their ideas transferring to their written word? And how might I work with them on both areas of need and areas of strength? And so nature journaling is one place that we might start. We might also consider other routines depending on our grade level and space and time that would also incorporate that access to the outdoors. One idea that's lifted is considering what you might call a forest Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday or Friday. But again, you're thinking about a routine because we know the more routine it is, the more that we're likely to do it as the educator, and the more it gives students a sense of control and also something to look forward to. And so Forest Mondays is something that I also worked on with that said classroom teacher in the previous slides, where she had applied for a small grant. And this small grant gave her the opportunity to purchase raincoats for her class. And as you can see from the picture, the raincoats were not of high quality, but they did the job. They didn't all fit, but the kids didn't mind. And it gave the chance for the kids to go outside when the other class was having indoor recess. Think about the power of that. It teaches children that we engage with the weather and with nature. We don't hide from it. It allowed them to go out and explore and be outdoors in a way that didn't restrict them based on what the outdoors was doing. But it also allowed them to keep their routine, because Monday was the day that they had their weekly nature walk, their lengthy one. They went outside every day, but the Monday routine was always the nature walk, Forest Monday. Now, they didn't have a forest near their space and place, but they did have vegetation. As they walked around the block, sometimes they went 2 or 3 blocks, it increased access to nature. And they would always pause and observe with their hand lens. That was part of the grant, their hand lens. They would stop and observe. As the year went on, they added field guides for the natural vegetation and plants that they were seeing. Their illustrations and their descriptions certainly became more detailed. And their enrollment and their attendance stayed consistent. And so when we were processing, was it worth it? The hassle, the questioning of other colleagues about the practice, the teacher I worked with said absolutely. That not only she saw more joy in her children, but she herself learned to engage in nature and see the benefit of it in a way that she hadn't before. And so whether you think about starting with a routine like that, or a little more grandiose, or something simple like this, again, we can't forget the benefits and the proven impact that increased nature has on kids. You might also consider a routine like this, adopting a tree. This is a book that might support the idea behind that. But in its essence, we're going out into our spaces and places, and we're giving kids the chance to say, if you could adopt one tree for the year, which one would it be? And you're allowing them time to wander, to evaluate each tree, whether it be a conifer or a deciduous tree, one that loses its leaves. And you're saying, after about 5 or 10 minutes, it's time to make your choice. Who will you be adopting? Which tree for the year? And the reasoning behind this is, again, change over time, patterns, descriptive language, inquiry, peer discussion, because certainly more than one child is going to adopt that tree. And so it gives them an opportunity to, again, have a routine, have a grounding place to go, that over the year, they're going to see that tree change and the space around it change all throughout the year. Think about the power of having children document that change over time, patterns, human versus animal impact. Now, unfortunately, as we think about the state of many of our schoolyards throughout our county, unfortunately, some of them look like this. Now, certainly, having a space to go outside is a great starting place, but we have to start challenging our systems that keep kids away from the natural space and provide instead more concrete than grass. We also have to think about some of the distractions that a playground with limited nature space actually might hinder behavior as opposed to helping. Certainly, many of our spaces don't have enough room for all the children. They're not designed to be learning spaces. They don't necessarily engage kids to want to come to school. And unfortunately, due to especially the increased heat that we're experiencing, many of them, because they're based in the concrete or black ash top kind of design, it's going to lead to children just simply being hotter and not wanting to play and engage, which leads them to be hotter when they come in back into your classroom. And so when we think about the opportunity that lies in what's called as greening our schools, we think about what would be the power in increasing natural schoolyards within Wayne County. What might be the benefit of taking a look at our current spaces and say, how could we greenify it? Now, this doesn't have to necessarily cost a lot, nor does it mean bringing in trees and planting grass or sod. It simply means, how can we think about our spaces as places for kids to play, to risk take, to create, and to hopefully increase their exposure to natural things? And so let's do some thinking about that, because there are some studies associated with not only the benefits to health and academics, but also resilience. And so when we look about the opportunity that certainly this beautiful example of a space might bring, is that we're also going to see more attentive children. Again, the more opportunity they have to engage in nature, purposeful, engaged, and also exploratory play of natural spaces, the more engaged we're going to see them in our classrooms and within our content. And so when we think about the opportunities that we have with perhaps mainly concrete spaces, we think about, if that's the space we have to work with, what can we bring in? What can we create? How can we engage a community, a builder, a company, someone who wants to be that support, a Kiwanis, a PTO, some sort of civic organization, a grant that might say, yes, we see the benefit of nature and increased access to it, and we want to work with schools to make a difference. There are numerous examples of how to do this online, and certainly it's a rabbit hole you could go down. But in essence, it's saying, what is the space that we have? What kind of exposure to nature does it provide? And how might we increase that opportunity with those who also want to see kids succeed? So when you're thinking about collective and community action, you're thinking about the simple fact of, if I have a group of people who say, yes, I want to see and do for kids that which will make them and help them to succeed in school, then we share the research around increased exposure to outdoor play in nature. And we say, if we want to see kids succeed, how much access to nature are we currently providing? And if it's not enough, how might we increase that to increase their performance? Because unfortunately, so many goals are tied to that. So let's use the good of nature to help students to succeed while also helping them find joy and engagement within our school spaces. It might even start with asking kids. What a great first week activity to take kids around the school and take a stop outside as a class. Depending on your age and grade, think about, is it a class discussion? Is it bringing our notebooks outside and first sketching? What do we see from our space? And then what do we hope it might be? What opportunity do we see to make it better? To ask kids, if you were the one in charge of creating a natural space for kids to play, what would it look like? That would be a great community builder and also a way for kids to start engaging in their school community, to start thinking that perhaps I do have a voice. I do have increased agency. My teacher wonders, how could I make this school better? And it's only week 1. So consider, how might we ask kids, what do you see in your current space outside? And what do you think it needs? And what could we do about it? Because when we think about it again, the potential of a green or increased green schoolyard, we can't ignore the benefits. Give you just a moment to look at that. And so when we think about that last bullet, especially increase in family and community engagement, again, how many schools have that as a goal, as an aim for the school year? And we think about the reasoning behind that. families see what's outside. They're not always blessed or feel comfortable to see what's inside, but they see the outside. And so if in the outside area, our school community includes a great outdoor learning space, a natural space where kids, even before school age, can come and play and climb rocks and engage in sand, maybe climb a tree, the better chances are that they're going to come and hang around. Think about the opportunity for after-school engagement, an opportunity for increased after-school activities with an outdoor learning center or space connected to nature. Think about how you suddenly might have families hanging out after school, the opportunity to engage and talk and learn more about them and their community and culture. And so increased green spaces outside don't just benefit the children during school hours, they also benefit what we're trying to do outside and connecting with the community as well. I'm going to take a moment to play this video. We probably won't have time to watch it in its entirety, but I just want you to think about one thing. What do you see here? What do you see from, I will admit, it's kind of older video, but its essence and ideas are still the same. What do you see from this? And what ideas does it give you for what your school might be or do this school year?
What you are about to see is the result of a pilot study. The next 60 seconds shows a whole school lunchtime speeded up, followed by a more detailed look at the scrap store playpod. The aim of this study was to find out if introducing loose parts into primary schools during lunchtime could benefit children's free play and support their behaviour in school. The study was an immense success and provided a wealth of evidence that children who are happy and engaged in play have a better experience at school. It has also been found that the adults in the school have a better experience of their school day. We have found that introducing a scrap store playpod in schools during lunchtime has 1. Introduced learning through play, 2. Significantly enhanced inclusion for all children, 3. Increased critical skills development, and 4. Helped to improve children's relationships and self-confidence. The Scrap Store Playpod helps to meet the 5 outcomes of Every Child Matters, and it enables children to experience other learning opportunities such as teamwork, negotiation, risk management, conflict resolution, improved communication and problem solving, all of which add up to happier, engaged children in school at lunchtimes.
It's had a real impact on the quality of the children's play.
It's given children a whole diverse range of things to do. It's given an opportunity to develop creative play. And more than anything, it's given them the chance to have a lot of fun and to work together as small groups, pairs, big groups. It's encouraged them to do a lot more talking.
The materials in the playpod don't dictate the way that children play with them. Children are free to use their imagination.
I'll pause it there. But would anyone like to unmute and share what they see or what makes them wonder or think for their own space, whether it's connected to what we've talked about in nature so far or what you see there? Any thoughts?
It's allowing the students to use their imagination more than just playing on swings or slides or monkey bars.
Yes, so they have to take what's there and do something or make something with it. I see in the chat, Nathaniel says kids are building. Oh, please go ahead.
I'm sorry. What that video actually did for me was that it took me back to my childhood, and that's exactly what we used to do. We used to, when we were able to go into the alleys, like you said, we were able to go a little bit further, back in the day, and we were picking up scraps and trying to build go-karts and things like that. And when I get with my friends from my neighborhood, that's what about how that made us so happy in our neighborhood and how we were so lucky to be able to do those things, which we see a lot of kids not able to do now. So that's what that did for me.
Thank you for sharing that memory. Yes.
I see students learning from one another, using different materials and collaborating with each other, and they're learning from each other.
Absolutely. So we see what we try and create in classroom collaborative work just naturally happening outside with a few loose parts and scraps, so to speak. Yeah. And so many in the chat are saying imaginative play, imagination, creativity. Again, all those things that we know, although we don't know what the jobs of the future might be, we know it's going to take that creativity, cooperation, the ability to take something and make it into something new. And so when we consider both, hoping to increase our access to nature and the outdoors, but also increase the chance for kids to build, this might also be a place to start. Because as you notice from the video, this is actually an example, as you could probably guess, in Europe, in England. But what they've done is, those things we could all say, all right, let's go in our garage, let's go into our shed, let's, walk even along the street during, recycling pickup, and let's all bring in, 3 or 4 clean, useful things kids might want to use. Whether it's the pool noodle that you're getting rid of after the summer, or it's the box or bag or table that's just been sitting there that nobody uses. And think about the power of coming together as a school community. Wouldn't this be such a fun first day back activity for staff? Those first day PDs where we're all, in the big auditorium, and instead we're all bringing in useful scraps and items to make an outdoor scrap pod or play place. That's a meeting I would like to facilitate. But just think about the power of coming together as a community and what you might be able to do. Absolutely. Cross-curricular STEM planning. What a wealth of ideas in the chat. And so if this is something that you're thinking about, shoot me an email, let me know, because again, one of the things that I work in at Wayne Risa is working with our early childhood and K-3 schools and teams, K-5. So if this is something you want to think more about, let's do that. I want to end with this. If it's with your permission, I am going to read it so that we can, all hear it. It's like somehow my screen has gone away. Let's try this. There we go. Can't end on that note, can we? There we go. So as we're thinking about what we might provide, whether it's something that we had as a child or what we hope to bring to the children now in our classrooms. This comes from an architect reflecting on the spaces and the current state of playgrounds now. And he had this to say: I am convinced that standardized play equipment is dangerous. When the distance between all the rungs on the climbing net or the ladder is the same, the child has no need to concentrate on where he puts his feet. This lesson cannot be carried over into all the knobbly and asymmetrical forms with which one is confronted throughout life. And so everything is so carefully planned out and safe, so to speak. Certainly we want kids safe. We also want them to risk take. So they become adults who will risk take and challenge systems and do great things that we might never have thought of. We can't make every space predictable and routine. We need to give them a space to wonder. And nature and outdoor exploration and play is one way to do that. So as you go back to your space and your sphere of influence, and you think about how you might become an advocate or continue your advocacy for increased outdoor play and nature, hopefully something that you've heard or seen or thought about here will help you do that. If you want to explore more, I want to make sure that you have access to a few more resources. Again, I'll make sure that we send not only the recording to those registered, but also a copy of the slides. These are just 3 more spaces that you might want to explore. The first is about outdoor learning. The second is nature journaling from the Wild Wonder Foundation that I mentioned. And the third is kind of thinking more about back to school and how, again, nature supports our social emotional learning and initiatives. My email is there, wilsonm@risa.net. I'm Mellissa. And if you want to continue this conversation or do any planning or thinking around your own school spaces or classroom, don't hesitate to email me and we can talk about how to chat further and explore more. Any last words or anything anyone would like to lift before we end our time together? Okay. Well, it is Thursday. It is nearing Friday almost. And I feel blessed to have the chance to have learned and chatted and thought more about outdoor exposure to nature and increased play for our kids. And hopefully I'll hear from some of you, all of you soon, and we can continue the conversation and explore more about how to give our kids what they really deserve, increased access to nature and increased play, both inside and out.